What's going on, friends and family? Thank you so much for watching Every Day is a Saturday with your host, me, myself, and I, Bryan Roof. Hey guys, we are on episode 2 already. If you guys didn't get the chance to watch episode 1, go back and check that out. That was all about Timothy McVeigh, an Army veteran, also known as the Oklahoma City Homa bomber. We kind of went down the whole story of him and got to hear his fate. And so our next episode here is kind of going to be a crazy one. So buckle up for this guy. He is one sick the minute dude. Right now we're going to be talking about Randy Kraft, who was born in Long Beach, California, March 19th, 1945. His branch of service was the Air Force. They don't even know how many victims this guy has. It's anywhere from 16 to 67, all young men. And he currently remains on death row at San Quentin State Prison, awaiting his fate. So the last episode, we kind of talked about some things. And, I always ask myself when I look at these stories is what made this guy tick and made him go do these nasty, heinous crimes? What do you guys think out there? If you guys have any kind of opinions whatsoever, I would love to hear from you guys. And, just shoot me an email. It's every day's a Saturday, 365 at yahoo.com. That's every day's a Saturday, 365 at yahoo.com. And shoot me an email. What do you guys think? What makes some of these, killers tick? Last one that we had with Timothy McVeigh, it sounded a lot like he was picked on. He was bullied. People didn't really like him. He was very standoffish, disconnected. And then as he got older, became really anti-government. And so we kind of got more of an understanding of kind of what was his motive. As I look into Randy Kraft, I'm kind of trying to figure out what it is. I think either he was just really sick and demented and had a real bad, weird fetish, and or was just kind of ashamed, because the time frame of when his story had occurred, being gay and homosexual type things, that was very unaccepted. A lot of people kept that on the hush. Randy Kraft himself, happened to like men and stuff like that. So we're going to kind of go down the story of Randy Kraft and listen to, his story. And I would love to, what do you guys think? What makes Randy Kraft go out and do these kind of crimes? Maybe we'll get some kind of an answer as we go through his story. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about when Randy Kraft was a young child. So Randy Kraft was born in Long Beach, California. As I had said, he was one of 4 child, and he was the only son. So, that's kind of funny. Timothy McVeigh was the only son. I think he had 2 sisters. So Randy Stephen, kind of same thing, but he had 3 other sisters. So the Kraft family lived modestly, and Kraft's mother took several jobs to supplement her husband's assembly line salary. Kraft's mother initially found employment as a seamstress in a Westminster garment factory before later obtaining employment as a cook in a local school. Nonetheless, Opal Kraft always found time for her children. In contrast, Kraft's father seldom attended any social gatherings with them and was later described as being distanced from his family. As a child, Randy was doted by his 3 older sisters and mother. Although he was known to be accident-prone, in 1948, the Kraft family moved from Long Beach to Midway City in neighboring Orange County. Their home was small, wood-frame Women's Army Corps dormitory on Beach Boulevard that Kraft's father renovated into a 3-bedroom home. The family became active in Westminster First Presbyterian Church, which Kraft's mother rising to the chairman of Deacons Committee. In Midway City, Kraft attended Midway City Elementary School, where his mother was a member of the PTA. As a student, his intelligence was noted by classmates and teachers. By 1957, Kraft was judged intelligent enough to attend accelerated classes at 17th Street Junior High School. So, adolescence and graduation. By the time Kraft had taken keen interest in politics, becoming a staunch Republican and aspiring to become a U.S. Senator. Shortly after his enrollment at Westminster High School, he had two close friends founded the Westminster World Affairs Club. At Westminster High, Kraft was again regarded as pleasant, bright student who regularly achieved A grades. He was also known occasionally to date girls, although some students and teachers later stated that they suspected Kraft was homosexual. So Kraft later stated he had known from his high school days that he was homosexual, although he initially kept his sexual orientation a secret. On June 13th, 1963, he graduated 10th in his class of 390 students. Wow. That fall, he had enrolled at Claremont Men's College, and this is in California, and he was pursuing his Bachelor's of Arts degree in economics. All right, so we'll kind of talk a little bit about, his childhood. It doesn't sound to me like Randy Kraft grew up in any kind of unordinary circumstances, like he had a very good home upbringing. It sounded like his sisters, doted all over him and stuff. So it's not like, where him and Timothy McVeigh kind of differ is Timothy was very alienated and stuff like that, loner type, where it shows here Randy Kraft seemed like he didn't have as much of a loner, and a lot of people liked him and known him to be as an intelligent person. I think the one thing that we kind of see here is it sounds like his dad was very, maybe not as much a part of it. Maybe he was just there, to be, the person who got, did the disciplinarying and all that stuff. Maybe his dad just wasn't there. So it sounded like he really wasn't a part of them going on family functions and things of that nature. Another thing is, like I said, back in the 60s and stuff like that, being a homosexual was very frowned upon and very secretive. So as he was growing up, he knew in his head that he was already homosexual, but wasn't acting upon it due to probably social, pressures and not, things of that nature. So maybe as I start looking into this, maybe some of this starts to play into a fact of what, when he grows up and gets to, kind of go down the path that he starts to go. But we're going to go ahead and get more into, before he actually joined the Air Force, he was going to Claremont College, as we had said. So we'll kind of talk a little bit more about his days at Claremont College. All right. So shortly after his enrollment at Claremont, Kraft enrolled in the Reserve Officers Training Corps and regularly attended demonstrations in support of the Vietnam War, and in 1964, campaign rallies of Republican presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. He later declared these actions were merely a simulation of his parents' political views and not his own, describing his second year at Claremont as being when he abandoned the last gasp of his conservative ideology. The same year, Kraft entered his first known homosexual relationship. In 1964, Kraft began working as a bartender at local Garden Grove cocktail lounge and catered to gay clientele. He also known to regularly travel to Laguna Beach and Huntington Beach to have casual sex with hustlers. In an apparent tentative effort to reveal his sexual orientation to his parents, Kraft took a succession of male friends to meet his family during his years at Claremont. Initially, Kraft's parents and sisters were oblivious to his homosexuality. In 1966, Kraft was arrested and charged with lewd conduct after propositioning an undercover police officer in Huntington Beach. As he had no previous criminal record, no charges were filed. The following year, he developed a radical shift in his political beliefs, becoming an ardent supporter of liberal views and eventually registered as Democratic. In 1967, Kraft quickly became Democratic Party organizer, campaigning tirelessly for the election of Robert F. Kennedy and receiving a personal letter from the senator thanking him for his efforts. By his senior year, Kraft had become a lackadaisical student drinking, taking drugs, and regularly attending all night gambling and poker sessions with other students. The lack of commitment to his studies in his final year resulted in Kraft failing to graduate from Claremont in 1967 and being forced to repeat his economic class, which postponed his graduation by 8 months in February of 1968. Kraft graduated from Claremont Men's College with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics. All right. So that's kind of interesting, I would say a little bit. And we're going to kind of see. This is his Long Beach home. I am showing right now. But we're going to kind of go through a little bit of his Air Force like where did he do in the Air Force? So we're going to kind of go through that, see what happened there. 4 months after graduating from college, Kraft joined the United States Air Force. He was sent to basic training in Texas before being stationed at Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California, where he supervised the painting of test planes. During his service in the Air Force, Kraft rose to the rank of Airman First Class and Supervisor Manager. The same year that Kraft became an Airman First Class, he disclosed to his family that he was homosexual. In a letter he wrote to a friend, Kraft described his father as having flown into a rage, whereas he described his mother as being more understanding. If somewhat disapproving, Kraft's family ultimately accepted his sexuality, and he remained in close contact with his parents and siblings, although his siblings noted he began to distance himself from his family after he had disclosed his sexuality to them. On July 26, 1969, Kraft received a general discharge from the Air Force after announcing his sexual orientation to his supervisors. The discharge was officially listed as being a medical grounds. In response, Kraft sought legal advice from an attorney to challenge the grounds regarding his discharge. The Air Force, however, refused to change the status of his discharge. Following his discharge, Kraft moved into his parents' home and obtained work as a bartender. So, as you can tell, guys, that he finally decided to come out and decide to tell his parents that he was homosexual. They didn't really, his mother took it as probably as a mother would, and his father probably took it as a father would, and especially back then. And although his parents ultimately seemed to accept his sexuality, I'm pretty sure that initial reaction and the way that the father had reacted, and I'm sure the mother probably reacted a certain way right off rip. It was probably a very much of a shock and awe. Because like I said, back in the 60s, that was, not much talked about. I'm sure it was going on, but it was very hidden and kept in the closet, so to speak. So I think that, that could probably have been a little bit where the fuse started to get lit for him. He, already with his father, I think he's always struggled probably with acceptance of his father, and especially knowing that his parents will feel some kind of way about him being a homosexual. So I imagine that kind of played into a lot of his psyche and being kind of ashamed of it. So maybe he felt like after he did his deed, he felt ashamed and he wanted to rid of his shame. I don't know. These are just thoughts and questions I'm asking, and who knows what, made this guy tick. So we're going to kind of talk about his first known sexual assault and kind of start getting into, what he started to do. This guy was sick and he had gone for many, many years doing this stuff. So we're going to go ahead and start talking more about all that, his first known assault, and we'll kind of go on to all the different things he had done throughout the years. So in March 1970, Kraft encountered a 13-year-old Westminster youth named Joseph Alvin Fancher at Huntington Beach. Fancher explained to Kraft that he had run away from home that day Kraft invited the youth to his apartment, promising that Fancher could live with him and offering him sex with a woman he claimed to know. Fancher agreed and accompanied Kraft to his Belmont Shore apartment, where he was drugged, beaten, and repeatedly sexually assaulted. Hours later, Fancher escaped from the apartment after Kraft left to go to work. Sorry, a member of the public, alarmed by Fancher's drug and disheveled condition, called an ambulance. Fancher's stomach needed to be pumped due to his ingested drugs. At the hospital, Fancher informed police that Kraft had given him drugs and beaten him. He did not disclose to either his parents or the police that he had been sexually assaulted due to the shame and fearing no one would believe him. A search of Kraft's apartment was conducted with the cooperation of his roommate. However, as Fancher had confessed to police, he had taken the pills offered to him voluntarily, and the officers had searched without a warrant. No charges were filed. Wow. So that's huge. That's kind of a big thing right there. The first time he does it, the victim is ashamed and doesn't want to be, come out and be honest about everything that had transpired due to the fact of just being, back, like I said, in those days, that thing was very much frowned upon, so much as to a victim who was victimized so bad they didn't want to say what happened to him due to the fear of how the public was going to handle it or receive it and where the judgment was going to lie. And this right here, had it been reported properly, Kraft could have probably got way more severe crime. But the thing is, it's back then, it's like this victim is sitting here having to, relive all the things that had transpired, was drugged to the point that probably didn't even remember a lot of it, during the time. But I mean, who knows? Who knows if that would have been a tall tale thing that would have led, to severe crime and maybe stopped Kraft from continuing on with his sick, lewd acts. I mean, and maybe this was like a thing of like, hey, I got away with it. I got away with it this time. I can get away with it again. And, and maybe that was a thing in his mind, and he learned, maybe I'll just dispose of it, and I don't know. I don't really know what's thinking in the mind of a serial killer, but it does make me start to think of what could lead them to think like that. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, is it he felt power after he kind of got away with the first victim, and then he felt like he can just get away with it more and more and more? And I mean, obviously 13 years, I think it was, he got away with it. So he obviously felt some kind of way about it. So let's kind of get to know a little bit more about him. So he enrolled at Long Beach State University. In 1971, Kraft found new employment as a forklift driver at Huntington Beach after his military discharge 2 years earlier. He enrolled at Long Beach State University, majoring in education to further his career prospects. There, Kraft became acquainted with Jeff Graves, a fellow teaching student from Minnesota, 4 years younger than Kraft, with whom he began a relationship with. So this is the first time he has an open relationship with someone, as you can see, and gets into more of a serious relationship. Kind of wonder what starts to happen. So between 1971 and 1983, Kraft is believed to have killed up to 67 victims. All of his suspected victims were males between the ages of 13 and 35, the majority of whom were in their late teens to mid-20s. Kraft was charged with and convicted of 16 of these homicides, all of which had occurred between 1972 and 1983. Many of his victims were members of the United States Marine Corps. Wow. And most of their bodies were found to have high levels of both alcohol and tranquilizers, indicating they had been unconscious when they were abused and killed. Kraft's victims were typically lured into his vehicle with an offer of with a lift or alcohol. Once in Kraft's vehicle, the victims would be piled with alcohol and or other drugs. They were then bound, tortured, and sexually abused before they were killed, usually either by strangulation or asphyxiation or bludgeoning. However, some victims had also ingested lethal doses of pharmaceuticals. At least one of the victims was stabbed to death. The victims would then be discarded, usually through, not exclusively, alongside or close to various freeways in Southern California. Photographic evidence found at Kraft's home indicates several of his victims were driven to his house before the murder. This is the Long Beach house that I was talking about. Many of the victims were burned with a car cigarette lighter, usually around the genitals, chest, and face, and several were found with extensive blunt force trauma to face and head. In several instances, foreign objects were found inserted into the victims' rectums, while other victims had suffered emasculation or mutilation and dismemberment. The majority of Kraft's murders were committed in California, although some victims had been killed in Oregon, with 2 further known victims murdered in Michigan on December 1982. First suspected murder victim. On October 5th, 1971, police found the nude body of a 30-year-old Long Beach resident named Wayne Joseph Duquette, discarded close to the Ortega Highway. Duquette, a bartender at a gay bar named The Stable in nearby Sunset Beach, had last been seen alive on September 20th. He had there was foul play on the body, and his body was completely destroyed, so that way they couldn't see anything. The cause of death was listed as acute alcohol poisoning due to high blood level alcohol. The first entry in Kraft's journal, referred to as a scorecard, reads, "Stable leading investigators to believe Duquette was Kraft's first murder victim." 15 months after the murder of Duquette, Kraft killed a 20-year-old Marine named Edward Daniel Moore. Moore was last seen leaving the barracks at Camp Pendleton on December 24th, 1972. His body was found beside the 405 freeway in Seal Beach during the early hours of December 26. Abrasion on Moore's body indicated he had been pushed from a moving vehicle. An autopsy revealed he had been found, bound at the wrist and ankles, then beaten with a blunt instrument about the face before being garroted. His body also exhibited numerous bite marks, and a sock had been forced into his rectum. 6 weeks after the murder of Moore, on February 6, 1973, the body of an unidentified male, estimated to be 17 and 25 years old, was found alongside the Terminal Island Freeway in Wilmington. This victim had been strangled with ligature and also a sock inserted in his rectum. 2 months later, on April 14th, the body of 17-year-old Kevin Clark Bailey was found beside a road in Huntington Beach. Bailey had been emasculated and sodomized prior to his murder. By July 28th, a further victims had been murdered on unidentified youth whose dismembered body was found in Wilmington on April 22. And a 20-year-old named Ronnie Jean Weeb, whose strangled body was discarded beside an on-ramp on the 405 freeway on July 30th, 2 days after he had disappeared. Welt marks had wrist and ankle suggested he had been bound and suspended from a device before his murder. Kraft is known to have killed at least once more in 1973. The victim was a 22-year-old bisexual art student named Vincent Cruz Mestas, whose body was found in the San Bernardino Mountains on December 29th. As with several previous victims, one of the victim's socks had been forced into his rectum. Mestas' hands had been severed from his body and were never found. Man. By November 1974, 5 more victims had been found beside or close to major roadways in Southern California, 3 of whom had been conclusively linked in the same killer. 2 of these victims, 20-year-old Malcolm Eugene Little and 19-year-old James Dale Reeves, had each been bound beside a freeway with foreign objects inserted into their bodies, whereas the body of the 3rd victim, 18-year-old Marine Roger Edward Dickerson, bore evidence of a bite marks, much like several other victims. On January 3rd, 1975, Kraft abducted and murdered a 17-year-old high school student named John Alaris. The youth was last seen boarding a bus in Long Beach. His strangled body was found the following day, discarded at Sunset Beach with a foreign object protruding from his anus. Drag marks along the beach close to where his body was found suggested 2 individuals had carried Lara's body into the water. 2 weeks after this murder, on January 17th, the body of 21-year-old Craig Jonanis was found discarded in the parking lot of the Golden Solace Hotel near the Pacific Coast Highway and Loyne Drive in Long Beach. Jonanis had been strangled to death with a length of string, possibly shoelace. Wow. So as you guys could see, he was pretty brutal. Like to stick stuff up in the anal cavity of people, of his victims and stuff like that, to leave his mark, I guess. I don't really know what he was getting out of that. The guy was really sick and twisted, to be honest with you. Just a sick dude. The car that he was driving was a 1965 Mustang. Looks somewhat like this, and it was dark in color. But that's kind of the car he had drove, and he was looting people into that car. I guess, probably showing it off, because back then this was probably a really nice ride. And it, newer ride, Mustang, probably was in great condition at the time. So we're going to go ahead and keep on going and talking some more about some of this dude's heinous crimes. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the interrogation and release. Long Beach police questioned Kraft about Courtwell's abduction and murder on May 19th, 1975. Initially, he denied having ever met either Cottrell or May, and the police, skeptical of Kraft's denial, summoned him to the police station for further questioning. Kraft admitted that on or about March 29th, he had encountered the 2 youths in the Long Beach parking lot in question and persuaded them to drink alcohol and consume Valium with him as he drove. He claimed to have returned May to the parking lot and then to have driven with Courtwell to a side road close to the El Toro off-ramp, where his car subsequently became embedded upon an embankment. He claimed to have walked alone to a gas station to call a tow truck while Cottrell remained with a car. Upon returning to his vehicle, Kraft claimed Cottrell had disappeared. Although Kraft's roommates confirmed that Kraft had phoned him on the date of Cottrell's disappearance, claiming that his vehicle was stuck on an embankment, detectives remained unconvinced by Kraft's version of events. The following week, 2 detectives attempted to file homicide charges against Kraft. However, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office declined, citing the coroner's conclusion from his autopsy remains thus far found consisting only of Cottrell's skull, that the youth had died of an accidental drowning. Perhaps because he had been questioned as a suspect in Cottrell's murder and because of additional turmoil in his personal life in the summer of 1975, Kraft is not known to have killed again until December 31st, when he abducted 22-year-old Mark Hall in San Juan Capistrano. In this instance, later described by prosecutors as the worst of all of Kraft's known murders, Hall was driven to a remote canyon where he was bound to a tree. The autopsy reported listed the cause of death as asphyxiation caused by lice and earth found lodged deep in Hall's trachea. The autopsy was revealed that Hall had been sodomized and emasculated with his severed genitals inserted into his rectum. Additionally, his chest, scrotum, nose, and cheeks had been burnt with an audible cigarette lighter, which was also used to destroy his eyes. The autopsy reported that the list of numerous incisions on Hall's legs, which had been inflicted with a broken bottle. Forensic experts were able to determine that Hall had been alive throughout much of the ordeal. Wow. It's just unbelievable. So we're going to kind of get more into him getting caught up, I guess you could say, and ultimately what had led to his ending in jail. So Kraft was initially charged with driving under the influence of alcohol and was held in custody as detectives conducted a thorough investigation on his vehicle. Upon the car's rear seat, investigators found a belt with width of which matched the bruising ground of Granville's neck. Other incriminating evidence included alcohol, tranquilizers, various prescription drugs, and stimulants. The passenger seat and carpet of the vehicle were heavily bloodstained. However, Gambrill had no open wounds. The upholstery was removed for forensic analysis, which confirmed the blood was human. Beneath the carpet, investigators discovered an envelope containing more than 50 photographs of young men in pornographic poses. Many of the subjects in the picture appeared to be either asleep or dead. Inside the trunk, investigators found a ring binder containing a handwritten list of 61 coded notations. A search of Kraft's home revealed further incriminating evidence, including clothes and personal possessions of numerous young men who had been murdered over the previous decade. Fibers taken from a rug matched those found on victim Scott Hughes. In addition, the couch in Kraft's living room was identified as being the one in the photographs found in Kraft's car. A roll of film discovered also contained shots of victims Eric Church and Roger DeVille sitting in Kraft's car. A ligature mark is clearly visible on DeVille's neck in one of these images. Wow. So, I mean, as you can see, dude had kept a scorecard, is what he had called it, and had all this stuff kept up. So on May 16th, 1983, Kraft was formally charged with the murder of Gambrill. By September 8th, investigators had interviewed over 700 witnesses and had gathered more than 250 physical exhibits, which pointed towards Kraft's guilt and a further 15 homicides committed between December 1972 and February 1983. He was formally charged with these 15 murders in addition to 2 counts of sodomy and 1 of emasculation on this date. So here's the list of men. Edward Moore, who was 20. Kevin Bailey, 17. Ronnie Weeb, 20. Keith Cottrell, 18. Mark Hall, 22. Scott Hughes, 18. Roland Young, 23. Richard Keith, 20. Keith Klingbeil, 23. Michael Enterbeating, 21. Donald Kreisel, 20. Robert Loggins, 19. Eric Church, 21. Roger Duvall, 20. Jeffrey Nielsen, 18. Terry Lee Gambrill, 25. As you guys could see, he had a thing for young men. The youngest being 17. The oldest was 25. So definitely had, like the younger ones. So his trial began on September 26, 1988. He was tried in Orange County before Judge Donald A. McCartan. At the trial, almost 160 witnesses were called to testify on behalf of the prosecution. Over 1,000 exhibits were introduced as evidence. These exhibits included physical evidence such as bloodstains, hair, and fiber evidence found at Kraft's Long Beach residence and in his car. Fingerprints found upon glass shards recovered from the Hall murder scene. Negatives and photographs of victims found hidden inside Kraft's vehicle, which depicted the men either dead, drugged, or asleep. The belt used to strangle Gambrell, the prescription drugs, and the buck knife found in his vehicle. Other evidence introduced included work and travel records and gasoline receipts, which placed Kraft in particular locations where victims had been abducted and or discarded, and the numerous personal possessions of various murder victims found in Kraft's possessions following his arrest. Kraft's defense was primarily one of alibis and alternate suspects. His attorneys dismissed much of the evidence produced as being circumstantial and attempted to portray Kraft as an articulate, hardworking, upstanding member of the community. They did not dispute that the 16 men were murdered victims, yet argued that they were victims of someone, but not Randy Kraft. The defense also pointed out that investigators had initially believed several of the 16 victims to have been killed by one or two other serial killers, Patrick Kearney and William Bonin, and argued that there was no concrete evidence that Kraft had killed any of the victims. The trial lasted a total of 13 months and would prove to be the most expensive trial in Orange County history. On April 29th, 1989, each side opened their closing arguments, which lasted a total of 3 days. The prosecution again listing all the physical and circumstantial evidence pointing to Kraft's guilt. The defense argued to the circumstantial case put forward by the prosecution that all the murders were linked and accusing the prosecution of glossing over the truth. Following the closing arguments, the jury deliberated for 11 days before reaching their verdict on May 12, 1989. Kraft was found guilty of 16 counts of murder, one count of sodomy, and one count of emasculation. So it's just crazy to me how, with as much evidence that is pointed to his guys, the defense is like, no, there's just no way. I mean, yeah, let's just forget that, there's stuff in his car, there's stuff at his house. Let's not forget the ring binder that kind of had the scorecard in it. So it's just crazy to me that the defense really went hard on trying to point their finger at other people. Your your client had stuff in his car. They found a victim when they arrested him in his car. So that's just crazy to me. But you know what? The funnier part is how law works. They can find loopholes. And the reason why the number is the way it is because of the law. You know what I mean? So some of these things are like, oh, well, circumstantial evidence. This person died due to drowning. Okay, well, how did they get there? It's just crazy to me. So we'll talk a little bit more about his conviction and incarceration. On August 11th, 1989, the jury rendered a verdict of death. 3 months later, on November 29th, Judge McCartan formally sentenced Kraft to death. The sentence was upheld by the California Supreme Court on August 9th, 2000. And as of 2023, Kraft remains on death row at San Quentin State Prison. He continues to deny his responsibility for any of the homicides he was either convicted of or suspected of committing. So, and I believe this is kind of the most recent photo that they have of him. And it's crazy to me. With Timothy McVeigh, yeah, he did kill 60, a lot of folks as well. More in the hundreds. I mean, but this guy Kraft has been alive for a long time. With Timothy McVeigh, man, they convicted him and had him put on death row, and he was got the lethal injection. I think it took them 6 years. So he's sitting here in San Quentin eating, getting, his 3 meals, still alive. I'm sure it's not the most kosher of life, but he's still breathing. It's just crazy to me, as many victims as they have came up with. But but it's just he's sitting there. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Of course, he's not going to admit it. But once again, there was entirely too many different evidence things on him that you cannot say that he wasn't guilty. Not only that, but he had the notebook with the scorecards, kind of bragging rights for himself. I don't really know what his motive was or whatever. I mean, like I said, it sounded like he had a halfway decent life, decent upbringing, was able to he was smart, intelligent, go to college, get into the Air Force, get a decent job. And then he just went on a really crazy crime spree. I mean, I do know that he started running himself into trouble, got himself kicked out of the Air Force, didn't finish honorably. That probably, got a little bit on his psyche and stuff as well. But anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We're going to keep on doing these true crime episodes as we go on. Hopefully it will get better. I know I'm new at this, so bear with it. I hope you guys are, like I said, are enjoying it. Please like it, share it out with your friends, your family. You guys can catch me anywhere on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple, all those places. There's, a lot to mention as well. If you guys want to watch it, you can watch it on YouTube. And the nice thing about Spotify, you could either watch it or listen to it or have both. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the nice thing about, I guess, having it with if you're a Spotify listener. But anyways, I hope you guys are having an amazing year so far and getting the best out of 2024. Make sure you guys are staying healthy, stay safe, all that good stuff. Until next time, we'll see y'all.